Imagine strolling with your baby, only for a neighbor to block your path and insist you hand her over. Now imagine your husband, a trained Navy SEAL, is watching every move. "Hand me that baby right now!" The words cut through the quiet street like a slap. Simone Ybarra froze, clutching her newborn tighter against her chest. She had just been strolling down Sycamore Avenue in Chula Vista, trying to give her little girl a taste of fresh air after another restless night. The California sun was warm, the air smelled faintly of jasmine, and for a moment she had felt almost at peace. Until Patricia Grenville appeared. Patricia, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood and president of the Homeowners Association, stood in front of Simone like a wall. Her sunglasses reflected the young mother's shocked face back at her. Her lips curled with impatience. "You can't just walk around with her like this," Patricia barked. "There are rules here. I need to check she's safe. Hand her over." Simone's voice trembled. "She's my daughter. I don't need to hand her to anyone." Patricia tilted her head as though Simone's words were a minor inconvenience. "This is an HOA community. Safety is our top concern. I have every right." Every syllable dripped with authority that nobody had granted her. The audacity made Simone's chest tighten, her hands automatically rocking her baby closer. She wanted to believe this was a mistake, that maybe Patricia was joking, but the woman's cold, hard expression told her otherwise. "I'm not giving you my baby," Simone said, firmer this time. That's when a low voice came from behind. "She doesn't need to repeat herself." Simone felt a wave of relief as her husband, Adrian Holtby, stepped closer. His presence alone shifted the air. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the calm confidence of someone who had faced down danger most people couldn't imagine. Adrian had been standing just a few feet back, letting Simone have her space, but Patricia's demand had crossed the line. Patricia's eyes flicked to him, then back to Simone, her face pinched. "And who exactly are you to interrupt?" Adrian's voice stayed level. "Her husband, the father of that baby, and you're going to back away." The sidewalk suddenly felt like a stage, every house around them watching. Curtains twitched. A neighbor's front door opened slightly. Someone whispered. A phone camera caught the angle from across the street. Patricia didn't care. She crossed her arms and huffed. "I don't care who you are, we have rules. If your wife is walking with that child in this community, I need to verify things are being done correctly. If you've got nothing to hide, there shouldn't be a problem." Simone's stomach dropped. Was this really happening? Just days ago, she and Adrian had been excited to move into what they thought would be a peaceful neighborhood, to raise their daughter. They'd chosen this area for its good schools and family-friendly reputation. Yet here she was, being told to hand her infant over like she was carrying contraband. Adrian stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Patricia. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The steadiness in his tone was enough to cut through her posturing. "No one touches my daughter. Not now. Not ever. You're done here." A silence followed. Even the faint rustle of leaves seemed to stop. Patricia's jaw twitched, but she didn't move. Simone felt her pulse hammering in her ears. Her arms ached from clutching the baby so tight. But she wasn't loosening her grip. She wanted to scream, to demand this woman explain herself. But the fear of what Patricia might do kept her frozen. Patricia leaned in, lowering her voice so only Simone and Adrian could hear. "If you don't cooperate, I'll call the board and the police." Adrian let out a short laugh, not mocking, but stunned by her nerve. "Call whoever you want, you won't get past me." Behind them, a man on his porch muttered, "She's lost her mind." Another whispered, "That's crossing the line." The neighborhood was awake now, every set of eyes glued to the standoff. Simone swallowed hard. The baby stirred, whimpering at the tension radiating from the adults around her. She pressed her lips against her daughter's forehead, whispering softly, trying to shield her from the madness. Patricia's tone sharpened. "I'm the president of this HOA. If you two want to live here, you'd better learn how things work." Adrian's expression didn't change, but his words landed like steel. "I've lived through war zones. You think I'm worried about your HOA rules?" For the first time, Patricia blinked. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected resistance, certainly not from a man whose calm seemed carved. Neighbors were stepping closer now, some with their phones raised, recording everything. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. The authority she had always relied on wasn't working. Here the balance of power was slipping, and she knew it. But instead of retreating, she doubled down. "If you refuse, I'll take this to the board immediately. This isn't over." Adrian took another step forward, closing the distance just enough to make his point clear. "Yes, it is." Right now, the baby began to cry, the small, sharp wail cutting through the tension. Simone rocked her gently, her heart pounding. To understand why Patricia Grenville thought she had the authority to demand a mother's newborn, you have to know who she is, and more importantly, who she believes she is. Patricia wasn't born into power, but she had learned how to seize it in the places that mattered most to her. In her 20s, she worked as a real estate assistant, fetching coffee and making cold calls. In Orange County, by her 40s, she'd married well, moved into an upscale development in Chula Vista, and found her identity in the one role nobody else wanted: HOA president. At first, neighbors saw her as helpful organizer. She coordinated block parties, sent out newsletters, and reminded residents about trash pickup days. But the more power she tasted, the more she pushed, and people, not wanting to rock the boat, let her. "Rules are rules," she loved to say, at meetings tapping her stack of papers like a gavel. But her rules went far beyond lawn maintenance and paint colors. She once scolded a retired veteran for planting a tomato garden in his front yard, claiming vegetables clashed with the aesthetic. She ordered a single mom to move her daughter's trampoline because it didn't meet safety standards. She even tried to find an elderly widow for feeding stray cats, arguing they were attracting undesirable wildlife. Behind closed doors, residents rolled their eyes. They whispered about Patricia's arrogance, over backyard fences, exchanged knowing looks at meetings, and texted each other complaints when another condescending email landed in their inboxes. But still, nobody stopped her, until Simone and Adrian arrived. Patricia's first impression of the Yarborough-Holtby family was filtered through her prejudices. She noticed Simone's natural hair, her relaxed but stylish clothes, and the way she carried herself, confident, unapologetic. Adrian, with his quiet authority, unsettled her even more. To Patricia, their presence wasn't just new. It was a disruption to the unspoken hierarchy she thought she controlled. She convinced herself she was only protecting the neighborhood. That was her story. But the truth was less flattering. Patricia craved dominance, and in her mind, demanding Simone hand over her baby wasn't outrageous. It was simply enforcing order. What Patricia didn't realize was that her actions weren't landing the way they used to. Residents had begun keeping score. A younger couple across the street, the Parks, had been fuming for months after Patricia ordered them to remove their wind chimes. Mr. Rodriguez, who lived on the corner, was still bitter over a fine he'd received for leaving his recycling bin out too long. And Mrs. Liu, a grandmother of 3, quietly resented the time Patricia reported her grandson for riding his bike too fast on the sidewalk. So when Patricia blocked Simone on the sidewalk that day, she wasn't just another HOA president laying down the law. She was a woman standing on the brittle foundation of years of unchecked behavior. Neighbors weren't just watching, they were waiting. At the time, though, Simone didn't know Patricia's history. To her, this was simply a confrontation with an unhinged stranger. Adrian, on the other hand, had already sensed Patricia's type. The first week they moved in, he had spotted her standing at the end of their driveway, clipboard in hand, scribbling notes about their landscaping. "Don't let her get to you," he told Simone after that first encounter. "People like her need an audience. If you don't give them one, they lose." But Adrian underestimated how far Patricia would go. Her demand for the baby wasn't an isolated outburst. It was the culmination of years of conditioning. Patricia believed nobody would ever challenge her. She was the president, the enforcer, the final word. And even when the neighborhood whispered behind her back, they still played along. This time, however, things were different, because Patricia wasn't facing a nervous retiree, a weary single mom, or a polite couple avoiding conflict. She was facing a mother fiercely protective of her newborn, and a husband whose calm exterior hides the experience of surviving missions in places Patricia couldn't pronounce. Still, Patricia wasn't the type to read the room. In her mind, she wasn't the one who looked unreasonable. She was saving face, maintaining order, proving that her authority extended even to the most sacred bond, a parent and child. It was twisted logic, and jungles face down enemies far more dangerous than an entitled HOA president. Patricia might not have known his resume, but she felt it in her bones. Adrian Holtby was not a man to be tested. The baby began to cry, loud and piercing, her small voice breaking the stalemate. Simone rocked her gently, tears stinging her eyes as she whispered, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here." Patricia opened her mouth, but whatever she meant to say caught in her throat. She could feel the weight of the neighborhood's stares. For the first time in years, she wasn't the authority figure, commanding obedience. She was the one being judged. Adrian finally spoke again, his words final. "You're done here. Patricia, go home." Her nostrils flared. "This isn't over." "Maybe not," Adrian replied, "but today it's finished." Patricia stood there for another beat, trembling with frustration, before spinning on her heel. Her shoes clicked hard against the pavement as she stormed back toward her house. The crowd remained silent, eyes tracking her every step. Simone exhaled shakily, pressing her cheek against Ava's head. Adrian placed a steady hand on her back, grounding her. By the time Patricia stormed back toward her house, the quiet block had transformed into something closer to a stage. What started as a tense triangle between Patricia, Simone, and Adrian had now drawn nearly a dozen onlookers. Curtains fluttered as faces peered out from windows. Garage doors cracked open just enough for neighbors to catch a view. Phones were out, red record buttons glowing. This wasn't just a spat between residents. It was a spectacle. Mrs. Liu stood at the edge of her driveway, still wearing her wide-brimmed sun hat and gardening gloves. She had paused in the middle of trimming her roses, staring in disbelief. Her lips pressed tight, but her eyes darted between Simone and Adrian, as though silently offering them support. Across the street, the Parks, Dylan and Jay had taken their toddler inside, but returned themselves, hovering on the sidewalk with folded arms. Dylan whispered, "She finally snapped," to his wife, who only shook her head. They had their own history with Patricia, a long argument about the noise pollution of their wind chimes. Mr. Rodriguez leaned against his porch railing, muttering under his breath, "Same old Patricia, always taking it too far." He fumbled with his phone, trying to record while keeping the screen angled discreetly. Even teenagers from 2 houses down had slipped out, their skateboards abandoned in the grass as they gorged at the confrontation. One of them whispered, "This is going viral. Man, Joe a psycho loses it." But Simone wasn't paying attention to them. Her entire body was focused on Ava, who was still crying, the sound slicing through the tension like glass breaking. She bounced her baby gently, whispering reassurances, though her own voice trembled. The adrenaline had her hands shaking, and she hated that Patricia had reduced her to this state, afraid in front of her own home. Adrian, on the other hand, had noticed every single witness. He didn't mind the cameras. In fact, part of him welcomed them. Patricia thrived in shadows, in closed-door meetings where she could bully people without consequence. Here, on a bright sidewalk with the world watching, she had exposed herself. When Patricia turned back halfway to her house, as though debating whether to make one more power move, the murmurs around her grew louder. "Don't do it," Dylan muttered, though not loud enough for her to hear. "She's embarrassing herself," Jay added, shaking her head. Patricia's eyes swept over the spectators. The realization set in. She wasn't just fighting Simone anymore. She was performing, and the crowd wasn't on her side. "You all saw this," Patricia shouted, suddenly gesturing at Simone.